Welcome to Starbound. If you're tired of AI-generated slop and want real, human storytelling, please subscribe and support this channel. My name is General G, and I'll be your narrator. Let's get into today's story. The funny thing about being a scapegoat is that they never pick someone apathetic. They pick the one who cared the most, the one who poured their soul into the project, because that's the one whose fall makes the most satisfying crash. My fall, they decided, would be spectacular. It would echo all the way back to Earth and shatter a fragile piece built on the bones of 2 generations. And so, I walked in shackled. In the Theshian High Court, superheated circuitry gave the air a sharp tang, a scent that mingled with the chill rising from the stone floor. The weight of hundreds of unblinking eyes pressed down, a pressure I felt in my bones. The space was grand and cavernous, designed to make you feel small, and it was doing a magnificent job. Towering pillars of polished black volcanic glass held up a vaulted ceiling that mimicked a star-filled night sky, each point of light a silent, watching eye. Hundreds of Theshians filled the tiered galleries. Their bioplated forms, built with an unwavering grace, were held with a rigid stillness that promised violence. Their large, dark eyes, motionless as polished stone, were fixed on me. Their low, chittering murmurs were a physical weight against my skin. My Theshian guards, reflections sliding across their slate-gray plating, shoved me forward. My boots scraped on an ornate sigil carved into the floor, the sigil of judgment. They forced me to my knees. The magnetic cuffs bit into my wrists, a cold and final promise. At the far end of the hall, on a throne that looked carved from a single massive thunder egg, its core glittering with raw, light-catching mineral deposits, sat the queen. She was a silhouette behind a wavering veil of woven energy, a tradition meant to separate the monarch's mortal form from her divine authority. All I could see was a regal outline, 2 antennae twitching slightly in the filtered light. To her right stood High Counselor Haddrak. I didn't need to see him clearly to feel the heat of his hatred. His plating was the color of dried blood, his posture rigid with a fanatic certainty. He held a data slate, the dossier of my supposed crimes, my death warrant. Haddrak spoke, his voice a low rumble, a discordant sound that set my teeth on edge. "The human, Kai Carden, sole survivor of the diplomatic vessel the Covenant, the saboteur responsible for the deaths of my esteemed colleagues, and your sole compact emissaries." He paused, a master of theatrical timing. The murmurs in the gallery sharpened, turning ugly, like the sound of grinding stone. "He is the rogue element, the proof that humanity's promises of peace are hollow. The Council has reviewed the evidence. We demand judgment. We demand death." A roar of approval shook the chamber. This was it, the final act of a well-rehearsed play. I was the villain, Haddrak was the hero, and the Queen was the silent, veiled authority who would stamp it all for approval. The procedure was clear. I was to remain silent, await my sentence. Begging was undignified, and defiance was pointless. But they'd picked the wrong man for a quiet execution. They'd picked a xeno-semiotician who had spent the better part of a decade studying their culture, a man who knew their pressure points, their history, their ghosts. I lifted my head, my guards tensed, one of them hissing, a low thrum of warning. I ignored him. I looked toward the veiled throne and did the one thing they wouldn't expect. I spoke in the formal high tongue, the language of their own sacred rites, not the sterile Theshian of the standard translator. "I greet the heart of the Imperium and the wisdom of its eternal throne." It was a defiant, archaic greeting, one reserved for a warrior surrendering with honor. It was also a massive breach of procedure for a chained prisoner. A shocked silence fell over the court, so profound I could hear the hum of the light fixtures. Even Haddrak's vocal plates, which had been clicking with aggressive satisfaction, froze mid-clack. On the throne, the veiled silhouette went completely still. "State your name for the record, human," the Queen commanded. Her voice was processed through the veil's filters, giving it a melodic, detached quality. A tremor ran through it, however, a discordant note in the perfect royal chord. I kept my gaze locked on her. Kai Carden, formerly of Sol Compact Intelligence, Xenosemiotics Division. The figure behind the veil straightened. Then, in a move that sent a wave of gasps through the galleries, she stood up. It was a shocking, unheard-of breach of royal decorum. A queen does not rise for a prisoner, ever. The energy veil flickered, wavering as she moved. Her voice, when she spoke again, was stripped of its royal filter. It was raw, unshielded, and trembling with a disbelief that cut through the cavernous hall like a shard of glass. Kai? The name, a fragile human sound in a monolith of alien stone, silenced the court. It shattered the theatrical gravity of the proceeding. Haddrak whipped his head toward the throne, his entire body screaming outrage. "Your Majesty!" he grated. "This display is unseemly. The prisoner is a known manipulator. Do not allow him to—" She didn't hear him, or if she did, she gave no sign. I watched her transfixed. She glanced at Haddrak, at the smug, predatory triumph practically radiating from him. She swept her gaze over the hostile faces in the council, a sea of hard plating and harder expressions, all waiting for her to do his bidding. She saw the trap she was in, the checkmate he had so carefully constructed. Then her eyes returned to me, kneeling in the center of it all. Her expression, once clouded with shock, hardened into a frightening resolve. She had seen the board, and she was about to make a move that wasn't on it. She descended the translucent mineral steps of the dais. Her bioplating was the color of pearl, its surface catching the light to create shifting hues of rose and pale green. Her features, while distinctly Theshian, were finer than Haddrak's sharp, aggressive lines. Her large, dark eyes were fixed on me, wide with an emotion I couldn't dare to name. Hope. It looked like hope. And I knew her. The years fell away. The polished court dissolved into a landscape of red dust and shattered rock. The sharp tang of circuitry was replaced by the smell of scorched insulation and dry, dusty air. She was a girl huddled by a flickering fire, her left arm held in a makeshift sling, her vocal plates bruised and unable to form proper sounds. She was Soraya. She stopped just before me, the hem of her royal robes brushing the stone floor inches from my knees. The entire court held its breath. She leaned down, her voice a low, urgent whisper that was for me alone. She spoke in a language no standard translator could process, a dead tongue I thought only existed in dusty archives and my own haunted memory. The lost dialect of the Sulan clan. Still afraid of the dark? The words, scratched in the dust between us on a desolate moon, stole the air from my lungs. The court, the queen, the danger, it all vanished, replaced by the ghost of a flickering fire and the taste of rust-red dust. It was our code. My breath hitched. The carefully constructed wall I'd built around my pass, the one that kept me functioning, cracked. The detached analyst dissolved, leaving the ghost of a terrified young man who had owed his life to the alien girl he found in the wreckage next door. My voice came out thick, a rough sound. Only when I'm alone. Confirmation flared in her eyes, a supernova of relief and terror. The girl was gone. The queen was back. She straightened up, her face a mask of regal authority, but her eyes were still locked on mine. She had made her choice. It was insane. It was beautiful. It was going to get us both killed. She turned to face the stunned, silent court. Haddrak looked like he was about to physically combust. "High Counselor," Soraya's voice was now steel, ringing with the full power of the throne. "You demand judgment. You shall have it, but not yours." She turned back to me. In one fluid, deliberate motion, she placed her hand on my shoulder. The contact was electric, a jolt of warmth through the thin fabric of my prison jumpsuit. It was a gesture of shocking intimacy in this public forum. "I, Queen Soraya Nyar, of the eternal line do hereby invoke the Theshian Vash." A collective sucking gasp went through the hall. The life debt vow, an ancient sacred rite so profound, so absolute, it was a myth, a history lesson. It was real. "I claim this life as my own," she declared, her voice resonating in the sudden tomb-like silence. "His debt is mine. His innocence or guilt shall be judged by my hand and my hand alone. Let his chains be struck." At her words, the magnetic cuffs on my wrists hissed and fell away, clattering onto the stone floor. The sound was deafening. Haddrak finally found his voice. It was a roar of pure, undiluted fury. "Treason! You invoke a holy rite for a human butcher! You defile our most sacred traditions for a monster! The Council will not stand for this blasphemy!" "The Council will ratify the vow, as is the law," Soraya retorted, her voice cutting through his rage like a scalpel. "Or it will declare no confidence in the throne. The choice is yours, Haddrak. You are no longer trying a human terrorist. You are trying me." Haddrak's face, a mask of jagged angles and fury, shifted. The rage was still there, but beneath it, a cold, cunning calculation sharpened his expression. He saw it, not a setback, but an opportunity, a way to finally unseat the young, peace-mongering queen who stood in his way. A figure detached from the wall beside the throne, a tall, slender Theshian in the stark, functional armor of the royal guard. Her plating was the color of slate, her every movement serving a purpose, with no motion wasted. Captain Soraya. Her face was unreadable, but her antennae gave a slight twitch. In 3 silent strides, she was at Soraya's side, her hand resting on the hilt on the sonic blade at her hip. She and 2 other guards formed a protective cordon around us, their backs to the seething court. Soraya looked down at me, her expression a torrent of apology, warning, and a desperate plea. "Hold on." I just looked back at her, the phantom weight of chains still on my wrists. I had walked in a dead man. Now I was something far more dangerous. I was a queen's gambit. My new quarters were a gilded cage. Soft light emanated from the walls themselves, illuminating woven tapestries, depicting Theshian victories I'd only read about. A low, comfortable-looking divan was piled with cushions of a rich, velvety moss. The air was scented with something like night-blooming jasmine and clean rain. It was a far cry from the holding pen where I'd spent the last week, contemplating the many ways a human could be executed by an alien government. Soraya had escorted me here herself. Her posture was rigid, her gaze fixed forward as she refused to meet mine. She posted 2 guards and left without a word. I spent the first hour just standing in the middle of the room, breathing. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Soraya's gambit hadn't saved me. It had chained me to her, and we were both standing on a political precipice. Hours later, the door chimed softly and slid open. Soraya entered, and the breath caught in my throat. She had shed the heavy, formal robes and the weight of her crown. She wore a simple, dark blue tunic that seemed to drink the light, making the subtle hues of her plating stand out. She looked younger. She looked tired. She looked like the girl I remembered. The door slid shut, leaving us alone. The silence stretched, filled with the weight of years and unspoken questions. "Kai," she said, her voice soft, the royal cadence gone. "Soraya," I replied. It felt strange to say her name aloud after all these years of thinking it. We just stood there for a long moment, 2 ghosts staring at each other across an 8-year chasm. "Your quarters are acceptable?" she asked, a faint nervous click coming from her vocal plates. "It's a step up from the last place," I said, managing a dry tone. "They seem to be operating on a one-bucket-fits-all policy." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "I'm sorry for all of this. The trial, I didn't know it was you until you spoke. Your name was on the manifest, but Carden is a common name. I didn't let myself hope." "Hope for what?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "That your long-lost human acquaintance would turn up as the most wanted terrorist in the Imperium? That's a very specific brand of optimism. She winced. When you put it like that. She drifted over to a large unadorned wall, and with a gesture, it came alive, resolving into a political map of the Theshian court. It was a complex web of lines and nodes. Certain nodes glowed a deep, angry red. This is what I've been fighting, she said, her voice hardening. This is Haddrak. I stepped closer. The red lines of his influence snaked through the council, the military, the trade guilds. They choked off a smaller, fainter network of blue, her own. Before he was a politician, he was a butcher, she murmured, tracing a line to a cluster of military nodes. During the Sulan campaign, they called him the Scythe of Ankalar. He put away the blade for the data slate, but the butcher is still in there. He's been patient, undermining the armistice since the day it was signed. He obstructs supply chains, manufactures border skirmishes, uses his proxies on the council to block every peace initiative I propose. The Covenant was supposed to be my triumph, proof that we could build something together. Her hand clenched into a fist. He turned it into my greatest failure. He framed you, the perfect symbol of human treachery, and handed me to the court on a platter. I was cornered. So you played the only card you had left, I finished, looking from the map to her. The Theshian Vash. You tied your political survival to mine. Not just political, she said, turning to face me. Her dark eyes were intense. I was fighting by his rules, Kai. Logic, precedent, political maneuvering, and I was losing. My own people see me as weak, a peacetime queen in a warrior's world. But your arrival? It was a disaster, and it was also the first unpredictable thing to happen in months. The first thing that wasn't part of his plan. She took a hesitant step toward me. He plays chess. I just kicked over the board. You kicked it over and lit it on fire, I corrected gently. Haddrak looked more than happy to warm his hands. He has 30 days to force a vote to nullify the vow. He'll use that time to shred what little support you have left. He thinks he can prove you're emotionally compromised and unfit to rule. He's right, she whispered, and the confession seemed to cost her dearly. I am compromised. I saw you kneeling there, and I couldn't let them kill you. Everything else came after. The silence after her admission was absolute. She had gambled her throne, the fate of the peace, everything on a memory from a forgotten moon. On me, the part of me that had spent years analyzing threat assessments was screaming about the tactical folly of it all. But the man standing in front of her was just grateful. Then we'll have to make sure he's wrong about the rest, I said. The words came out before I'd even thought them through. We prove I'm innocent. We find the real saboteur. We turn his own game against him. A flicker of the old Soraya, the determined survivor, returned to her eyes. How? My intelligence services are compromised. My guard is loyal, but they are soldiers, not spies. Haddrak's web is everywhere. He thinks I'm a liability, I said, a slow, cold anger beginning to burn in my chest. A purpose. A weakness to be exploited. Let's show him what a weakness can do. Later that night, alone in the silent, opulent room, the memories came for me. They always did in the quiet hours, but this time they were from long before the Covenant's destruction. They were older, redder. I was crawling. The world was a haze of pain from my shattered tibia and the acrid smoke filling the cramped space of my crashed scout ship, the Stray. The main power was dead, the emergency strobes casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Each flicker felt like the world winking out of existence. I was 22 years old, and I was going to die on a desolate, uncharted moon in the disputed borderlands. My hand slipped in something slick, and I realized I was crawling through the blood of my pilot, a good man named Finch. I squeezed my eyes shut, bile rising in my throat. Then I heard it, a faint scraping sound from outside. Not the groan of stressed metal or the whisper of the thin atmosphere, it was deliberate. Adrenaline trumped pain. I pulled myself toward the cockpit's shattered viewport, my sidearm heavy in my trembling hand. A figure was moving out there, silhouetted against the larger, more angular wreckage of another ship. Theshian. The war was officially over, but out here, treaties were just words. I watched, my heart hammering against my ribs as the figure stumbled and fell. It didn't get back up. Curiosity is a dangerous human trait. It's what got us to the stars, and it's what gets a lot of us killed. I spent the next hour rigging a makeshift splint and forcing my way out of the wreck. The alien lay where it had fallen, a splash of pale color against the rust-red dust. As I got closer, I saw it was smaller than the warriors I'd seen in vids. Its plating was damaged, cracked along one arm and across its side. It was barely more than a youth. A girl. She stirred as I approached, trying to push herself up. One of her arms was useless, and she hissed in pain, a series of sharp clicking sounds. Her eyes, huge and dark, fixed on me. They weren't filled with hate, they were filled with fear. My standard translator was fried, so was hers, apparently. We were two enemies, stranded and broken with no way to communicate. Except I had spent 3 years at the Aegeus Institute obsessively studying Theshian languages, including the dead ones. I held up my empty hands, a gesture I hoped was universal. I took a slow step forward. "I am not here to harm," I said, my voice hoarse. My pronunciation of the standard Theshian was clumsy, academic. She just stared. So I tried something else. I knelt, the pain in my leg screaming, and sketched in the dust with my finger, the symbol for truce. Her antennae twitched. She watched my hand, then looked back at my face. Slowly, painstakingly, she used her good hand to sketch a symbol next to mine, the Theshian glyph for water. That was how it started, a truce born of desperation. Her name was Soraya. My ship had the med kit. Hers had the working water recycler. We dragged our supplies and ourselves into the sheltered lee of a rock formation and began the business of surviving. Days bled into weeks. We learned to read each other's movements, the subtle shifts in posture. My ingrained distrust and her warrior pride were luxuries we couldn't afford. They burned away under the heat of the system's binary suns. One night, huddled by a fire we'd made from scavenged ship components, she fell into a dark despair. Her vocal plates were too bruised to speak properly, so she wrote in the dust, her elegant script a stark contrast to the grimness of her words. "My people only understand strength, the strength to conquer, the strength to kill. They will see my survival with a human as a stain on my honor." I remembered looking at her, the firelight catching the shifting hues of her plating, and feeling a fierce, protective urge. "Then show them a different kind of strength," I said, my voice low. "The strength that builds things, the strength that saves lives. Promise me, Soraya, when you get back, show them." Her head tilted, her large eyes studying me. Then she took the stick from my hand and wrote, "Only if you promise to tell your people that not all Theshians are monsters." "I promise," I wrote back. A week later, our respective rescue ships arrived almost simultaneously. It was a chaotic, tense affair. Her people saw a high-born noble being held by a human soldier. My people saw a wounded officer being menaced by a Theshian warrior. We were pulled apart, shouting uselessly over the comms that the other was not an enemy. The last I saw of her, she was being hustled aboard a sleek Theshian vessel, looking back at me, her expression one of anguish. The official report listed her as Soraya Nyar of Clan Sulan, a minor noble house believed to have been wiped out in the war's final offensive. I was told she likely didn't survive her injuries. I was debriefed, decorated for surviving behind enemy lines, and reassigned to a desk where my talent for pattern recognition could be put to better use. I buried the memory of a promise made in the dust of a forgotten moon. Until today. Soraya returned the next morning. The exhaustion was still there, etched around her eyes, but it was overlaid with a new resolve. She carried a thin, silver data slate. "The vow makes you a member of my household," she said, getting straight to the point. "It places you under my direct authority and protection. As of this moment, I am exercising that authority." She held out the slate. "The Council has been informed that given the circumstances, I require a special analyst. someone with a unique outside perspective on Sol-compact military strategy and intelligence procedures, someone whose loyalty is unquestionable because their very life depends on my own. I took the slate. It was cool and light in my hands. "I am formally deputizing you, Kai Carden, as my royal analyst," she declared, her voice taking on a hint of the formal cadence she used in court. "Your mission is to find the truth behind the Covenant sabotage. Find me the proof that will exonerate you and expose Haddrak." I looked down at the slate, then back at her. "You're giving a prisoner access to Imperial intelligence?" "I am giving a member of my household a job," she corrected. "My own intelligence corps is compromised, riddled with Haddrak's loyalists. I don't know who to trust, but I trust you." She gestured to the slate. "This will give you access to the palace's internal surveillance network. Visuals, audio, sensor logs, everything within these walls. It's also a secure comlink, keyed only to me and to Guard Captain Sarida. She will be your hands and feet outside this room." My gilded cage had just become my command center. I had a purpose again. The weight of it was terrifying and exhilarating. "Sarida doesn't trust me," I stated. "Sarida's trust must be earned," Saraya said. "She is loyal to the throne, and more importantly, she is loyal to me. She sees you as a threat to both. Prove you are an asset instead." She turned to leave, then hesitated. "Good luck, analyst." The first test of my new position came that afternoon. Sarida appeared at my door, her expression as unreadable as ever. "The Queen has ordered me to escort you to the palace gardens. She believes you would benefit from fresh air." It was a pretext. We walked in silence through xeno-botanical wonders. I broke it. "You disapprove." "My opinion is irrelevant," she replied, her words short. "I follow orders." "But you think she's made a mistake. A sentimental, dangerous mistake." Her vocal plates gave a single sharp click. "The Queen feels a great responsibility to build a lasting peace. Sometimes this admirable impulse can cloud her judgment." "You think I'm a cloud." "You are a complication," she corrected. "One that has placed the Queen in a position of extreme vulnerability." Her honesty was brutal and reassuring. It happened as we passed under a heavy stone archway. A deep groaning sound from above. A shower of dust, then a shadow fell over us. "Down!" Sarida's voice was a whip crack. She slammed into me, driving us both to the side. We hit the soft turf hard, just as a massive stone gargoyle crashed onto the path where we had been standing, shattering into 1,000 lethal shards. We lay there for a second, my ears ringing. Sarida was already on her feet, sonic blade humming. Her guards came running, securing the area. They examined the wreckage. "Structural failure, Captain," one reported. "Corrosion." But as they worked, I saw something else. A faint greenish-black residue stained the stone where the support had been, a color that spoke of chemistry, not natural decay. When Sarida came over, I spoke quietly. "It was deliberate." She stiffened. "My team are experts, Royal Analyst." "I'm sure they are, but they're looking for decay, not design. Look at the stain on the archway, the residue. It's a chemical corrosive, fast-acting. It would have eaten through the remaining healthy stone in minutes." She followed my gaze, her eyes narrowing. She hadn't seen it. Her guards trained to look for bombs and assassins had missed the subtle work of a saboteur. "I want a sample," I told her, "and a list of all chemical suppliers with contracts to the Palace Groundkeeping Guild. Covertly. No one knows we suspect anything." Sarida stared at me for a long moment. The suspicion was still there, but it was now joined by something else, a flicker of grudging respect. "I will see it done," she said. The very next day, the universe decided our 30-day clock was too generous. A Priority 1 message arrived, flashed from Soraya's terminal to my slate. It was an official ultimatum from the Valdian Imperium High Command. It was polite, militaristic, and as menacing as a loaded gun. It noted that the Covenant had been destroyed in the disputed Antari sector, territory over which they claimed jurisdiction. It therefore demanded my immediate transfer into Valdian custody for trial. The final sentence was the payload. Failure to comply within 10 standard days will be considered a breach of territorial sovereignty, and the Imperium will be forced to take appropriate measures to secure its borders. A Valdian battle fleet was massing in the Antari sector, right on their doorstep. The signature at the bottom made my blood run cold. Conqueror Malak, a brutal expansionist who had publicly called Soraya's armistice a coward's pact. When Soraya came to my room, her face was grim. "He's ruined my timeline," she said, her antennae twitching with agitation. Haddrak's plan was to let me bleed for 30 days, to slowly pick apart my support until the vow became untenable. This forces everyone's hand, mine and his. "They're working together," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "It's the only thing that makes sense. Haddrak creates a pretext with the Covenant. Malak uses it to beat the war drums. They're manufacturing a two-front crisis, and Malak just hit the accelerator." "A theory with no proof," she countered. "And in 10 days it won't matter. Malak's fleet will be in firing range, and my council will panic and hand you over just to stop a war." The pressure was a physical thing, a vice tightening from 2 directions. My mind raced, searching for an angle, a weakness. An idea began to form, inspired by a memory, a different kind of strength. Turn their attack into your opening. "He thinks I'm your weakness," I said. "It's time we used that against him. He's going to try to get closer. He's going to plant a bug or an agent to gather more evidence of your compromised state." "And when he does?" she asked. "We let him," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "We let him think he's listening, and then we tell him exactly what we want him to hear." Haddrak's move came faster than I expected. The next day, a new attendant was assigned to my quarters, Nia of Clan Jaral. She was sharp, her amethyst plating polished to a near-mirror finish, and she moved with a fluid economy, each gesture exact and contained. She was deferential, helpful, and an exceptionally competent spy. She never lingered, never asked leading questions. She simply did her job with quiet perfection, and if I hadn't been looking for it, I never would have noticed the way her attention always seemed to drift for a microsecond toward the environmental control panel. "She's good," I told Soraya via the secure comm on my slate. "Too good. I think she planted something, but I can't find it. I need a technical sweep. Discreet." "Acknowledged," was Soraya's only reply. An hour later, a maintenance drone hummed into my room to recalibrate atmospheric particle counts. 10 minutes after it left, a message from Soraya appeared on my slate. It was an image of a tiny bioorganic spore, no bigger than a grain of sand, discovered adhering to the inside of the panel's grating. It was listening to every sound in the room. Attached was a second file. Clan Jaral. Primary holdings in industrial chemical manufacturing. The bait was taken. Now to set the hook. That night, Soraya came to my room. I gave her a subtle glance toward the panel. She nodded almost imperceptibly. We were on. "You're using me!" I roared, putting every ounce of frustration and fear I could muster into my voice. I paced the room like a caged animal. "This was my mistake. I should have stayed in my cell. At least I knew what was coming." "She's at the listening post now." Soraya's text appeared on the slate I held, angled away from the panel. "Haddrak is with her." "I saved your life," Soraya shouted back, her voice laced with a perfect cutting fury. "Is this the thanks I get? Ungrateful human? Do you have any idea what I've risked for you?" On the slate I typed, "Time to give him something to chase. Mention the gargoyle. Make him think we're on the chemical trail." "Risked?" I scoffed, throwing a cushion at the wall for effect. It felt ridiculous, but from the slight widening of Soraya's eyes, it was apparently convincing. "You've done nothing. That thing in the garden nearly killed me, and your guards called it an accident. An accident! What's next, Soraya? A faulty food synthesizer? A natural gas leak in my room?" "He's leaning closer to the console," Soraya texted. "He's interested." Soraya's voice dropped to a hiss, as if she were trying to keep from being overheard by the guards outside. "We are looking into it. I told you that. The chemical residue is complex. We are tracing the suppliers." It was a beautiful performance. We were feeding him the truth, wrapped in a lie. We let him think he was learning our secret plan, that our investigation was focused solely on the corrosive and the attempt in the garden. We let him believe he was one step ahead. The argument evolved from there, ending with Soraya storming out of the room. The show was over. The real work was about to begin. The clandestine meeting took place in a dusty, forgotten corner of the palace archives. Lord Kaman of the Orda clan stood waiting, his polished chrome plating reflecting the dim light from the glowing data scrolls. He looked like a machine given life. "Royal analyst," Kaman said, his synthesized baritone devoid of inflection. "The Queen takes a significant risk arranging this. You have 5 minutes to justify this anomaly." I bypassed the talk of honor and vows. "I'm here to discuss profit and loss." His head tilted a fraction of a degree, a raised eyebrow. "Haddrak is selling you stability," I said. "He claims the Queen is a risk. He is lying. Haddrak wants war. He is a fanatic driven by grief, and fanaticism is always bad for business." "An assertion," Kaman stated, "not evidence." "This is evidence," I said, holding up my slate and projecting the ultimatum from the Valdian Imperium, a rival power's war hawk, escalating a crisis of Haddrak's making. "Now let's talk about your clan. A war would bring a short-term profit in hyperdrive components, but the Valdian strength is in brute force conquest. They would shatter our trade brutes, including those with the Soul Compact. They would break your commercial monopolies, and Haddrak, in his blind crusade, would let them. Soraya offers peace, a stable, open trade agreement with the Soul Compact, joint ventures. Think of the market share." I laid out a logical, data-driven case. I didn't ask for his help. I simply presented 2 futures and let him choose the more profitable one. He was silent for a long time. "Your analyst is compelling," he said finally, "but it remains theoretical. I require verifiable proof of collusion." "I believe I can get it for you," I said, "but I'll need your help. Haddrak is listening to my conversations through a bug planted in my room. I'm going to feed him false intelligence. I'm going to make him believe a Valdian Black Ops team is planning to abduct me during the rite of divestment. When he contacts Malik to coordinate a response, I need you to be listening." Kaman's chrome finger steepled. "Haddrak's paranoia is his weakness. He insists on using our clan's proprietary paired particle communicators. He believes their encryption is absolute. He forgets that the craftsman always builds a master key. It will be difficult, but not without possibility." His head tilted again. "This is a high-risk, high-yield venture, Analyst Carden. I find the logic appealing. Provide me with the time. My people will handle the rest." He turned and glided out, leaving me in the dusty silence. The trap was about to be set, and I was the bait. The final pieces snapped together. Soraya's team, working with the manifest side flagged, found the real connection. The sabotage on the Covenant was an elegant piece of work, a targeted EMP burst, calibrated to fry only the navigation and life support backups while mimicking the energy signature of a common solar flare. The device was installed during a routine maintenance check. The shell corporation that performed the maintenance was a subsidiary of a larger conglomerate owned by Clan Jaral, Nia's family, the same clan that manufactured the unique corrosive used on the gargoyle. The pattern revealed a conspiracy, a hidden trail of money and influence far too intricate for a sloppy villain. Now it was time for the real lie. That night, listening to the hum of the biosphere in the panel, I made a covert call on a secondary channel I knew they could break. I spoke in rushed, coded phrases to a non-existent contact. "The package is ready for retrieval. Operation Chimera is a go. The ceremony is the window. Maximum chaos. Malik's fleet will provide the cover. Acknowledge." We let the lie sit for a few hours, let it fester in Haddrak's mind. The idea of a rival power's commandos desecrating a holy rite to snatch the prize from under his nose would be an intolerable insult. He would have to act. Lord Kaman's message came just after midnight, a simple encrypted text. Transmission intercepted. We have what you need. Good luck, analyst. The trap was sprung. All we had to do now was survive it. The day of the rite of divestment arrived gray and cold. The throne room was packed, a suffocating sea of plated bodies and tension. Haddrak stood at the head of his council faction, his face a mask of grim, righteous certainty. He thought this was his coronation. I was brought in and knelt on the sigil. My heart pounded a steady, hard rhythm. This had to work. Soraya descended from the throne, her face pale but composed. "The council has been convened," she announced, her voice resonating with feigned resignation. "I have considered the wisdom of the High Council. Therefore, with a heavy heart, I will begin the rite of divestment." She raised a hand to place on my shoulder to sever the vow, and then she stopped. "However," she said, her voice suddenly ringing with iron, "first, this council will hear evidence regarding the destruction of the Covenant." A confused murmur swept the room. Haddrak stiffened, his triumph faltering. This wasn't in his script. "Captain Sarida," Soraya commanded. Sarida stepped forward, her slate projecting images into the air. Financial records, shipping manifests, a complex web of shell corporations. "Our investigation has uncovered a conspiracy," Sarida stated, her voice dispassionate. "A shell corporation, owned by Clan Jaral, performed the final maintenance on the Covenant, installing a device that disabled life support. This same clan manufactures a unique chemical corrosive, traces of which were found at the site of the attempt on the analyst's life." She pointed a gauntleted finger at a cowering amethyst-colored Theshian in Haddrak's retinue. "A conspiracy orchestrated through Lady Nia of Clan Jaral on behalf of her patron." All eyes turned to Haddrak. He sneered. "Circumstantial? A desperate fiction woven by a failing queen." "Is it?" a new voice asked. A synthesized baritone. Lord Kaman stepped forward from the neutral block. "Perhaps a more direct form of evidence is required." He raised his own slate, and the throne room was filled with the sound of Haddrak's voice. "The human suspects the chemical trail," the recording played, Haddrak's grating rumble unmistakable. "Let him. It is a dead end. Malik, your fleet must be ready. When the Queen's pet signals his phantom abductors, I will have my own agent in place. The human will die a martyr, and the Valdian incursion will give me the mandate I need for a war." The recording of Haddrak speaking with Conqueror Malik echoed in the stunned silence. Treason, plain and undeniable, broadcast for the entire court to hear. Haddrak's face was a horror of disbelief turning to pure animalistic rage. Everything, his plans, his reputation, his vengeance, was annihilated in a single stroke. He was ruined. He threw back his head and roared, a sound of pure hate. "You!" he screamed at Soraya, his voice cracking. The politician shattered, leaving the butcher she'd told me about. "You will not have this victory!" He drew himself up, spittle flying from his vocal plates. "I invoke the right of final challenge, trial by combat for the throne." A gasp went through the court. A counselor near Kaman shouted, "That right is archaic. It has not been used in 5 centuries. One of Haddrak's few remaining loyalists snarled back. "But it was never struck from the law. It stands. The challenge is legal." Haddrak was a cornered animal, falling back on the one thing he had left, the violence that had defined his youth. Soraya looked at the raging, broken Theshian before her, her expression not of fear but of cold, analytical pity. "I accept," she said. The court cleared a space. Sarida offered Soraya a sonic blade. She took it, her grip steady. Haddrak activated his own, a heavier weapon that hummed with destructive power. He lunged, a storm of motion meant to overwhelm her. He was all fury. every strike a killing blow. But Soraya didn't try to meet his force. Instead, she used his own momentum against him, letting him defeat himself. His rage made him strong, but it also made him clumsy, predictable. He overextended on a powerful slash, and she wasn't there. She sidestepped and brought the flat of her blade down hard on his wrist. His weapon clattered to the floor. He stared at his empty hand, then at her, his chest heaving. He had been outthought. Soraya stood over him, her blade's tip resting under his chin. "The strength to build, not break," she said, her voice quiet but carrying through the hall. As Haddrak sank to his knees in defeat, Soraida's voice cut through the air. "Hold!" Her guards converged on a cloaked figure who had been moving stealthily through the chaos near Haddrak's faction. It was the assassin from the recording, come to fulfill his orders. He fought back, but was quickly subdued. He remained silent, eyes burning with hate, a true zealot. "No confession needed," Zoraida announced, holding up the assassin's hand. She pulled a heavy ring from his finger. "The signet of the House of Haddrak, worn only by the High Counselor and his sworn honor guard." The final nail. Soraya deactivated her blade. "High Counselor Haddrak," she declared, her voice ringing with absolute authority, "you are found guilty of treason. I strip you of your title and banish your clan. Your name will be a lesson in treason, erasing any legacy." She turned her back on him, a final dismissal. The crisis ended where so many things do, in the quiet darkness, looking at the stars. Soraya had brought me to her private observatory, a dome of transparent mineral at the highest point of the palace. The city spread out below us like a blanket of scattered jewels. "This peace," she said finally, her voice soft. "We'll have to fight for it, every day." The man who had walked into her court expecting to die would have agreed with a tired sigh. He would have seen only the endless struggle, but he wasn't here anymore. I looked at her, at the quiet strength in her profile, the subtle rose and green hues of her plating in the starlight. I saw the girl who shattered her water and the queen who gambled a throne. "Good," I said. I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers curled around mine, warm, solid, real. "I'm not going anywhere." She turned to face me, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her features. There was no cynical armor left to shed, only a quiet, stubborn hope. She had shown her people a new kind of strength, and she had made me believe in a future worth fighting for. Her eyes searched mine, and in their dark, star-dusted depths, I saw our promise fulfilled. She leaned closer, and I felt a strange, electric anticipation. She lifted her free hand and gently, hesitantly, touched my temples with the tips of her antennae. The gesture was more profound than a kiss. It was a flood of shared sensation, a current of feeling that bypassed words entirely. I felt her relief, her exhaustion, her fierce, unwavering resolve. And I felt her see me, truly see me, not as a human or an analyst, but as Kai, her partner. It was the bedrock of an alliance, forged in dust and sealed in starlight.